recording this workshop. So you can review some of this information and this content later if you want to go back and actually have, if today you're just taking notes and you want to go back, review the recording and have QuickBooks open and kind of mess around with things with that, you certainly have that option. But I am thrilled that we could have this workshop. We are always very excited to partner with our friends over at Swindle, Jansen, Hawk & Lloyd, who are fantastic accountants and know their way around this software and this system like the back of their hand. And like I said, they're fantastic. We have Vicki Courtney here, Debbie Cohen, as well as Rachel England. I hope I pronounced that right. And I'm gonna turn it over to them, and they're gonna do some brief introductions. And like I said, we'll go ahead and get started here.
Thank you, Patrick. I want to thank you all and the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber for having us again. We really enjoy being able to come and share our knowledge. Rachel and I both love QuickBooks, and so we love to be able to share that knowledge and hope people walk away with maybe something new that they didn't know, or maybe something that will help them resolve an issue that they have. My name is Vicki Courtney. I have been with Swindle, Jansen, Hawk & Lloyd for about 14 years now. I am our CAS manager, and CAS is our Client Accounting Services. Basically, that means I work in QuickBooks a lot. I work in both QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online. What I do is I kind of work with clients. I work with them. We do outsourced bookkeeping, where we basically do their bookkeeping work for them. We train them on QuickBooks. We kind of also work with them on maybe finding some efficiencies in their processes and procedures when it comes to their accounting. And so I love what I do. I've been here for a while, and my favorite part is getting out and kind of sharing my knowledge again, like I said, and hoping I can help somebody get a little bit farther down the road. Rachel England is going to help teach this class with me. So you'll get to hear me teach some sections, and then she will teach some sections as well. So I want to go ahead and let her introduce herself.
Again, my name is Rachel England. I started in Swindle, or started out as an intern in the summer of 2017. And then I came on full-time in December of 17. I graduated from Kansas State University with a bachelor's in personal financial planning. I work full-time on the CAS team, and Vicki kind of went over everything we do. And I enjoy working with clients and interacting.
And then we also have Debbie Cohen on the call. She is one of the partners here at our firm. So she's going to help chime in if there's any questions that maybe Rachel and I don't know. If it gets more on the tax side, or maybe something that we don't know, she'll chime in. But I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself as well.
Good morning. I'm Debbie Cohen, and like Vicki said, I'm a partner with Swindle, Jansen, Hawk & Lloyd, and I was with CBiz for 17 years and then with Swindle for about 5. So I've been around the block a few times, but I love nonprofit work, and that's kind of one of the niches that I spend a lot of time in. And even though I'm on the audit and do a little bit of tax, I do a lot of advisory. And so we love doing presentations like this to groups of people that we can help. So please bring all of your questions that you have to our group, and we'll try our best. If we can't answer them today, we'll get back to you with the answers.
Thank you, Debbie. I just wanted to, I have a few housekeeping items basically for the class. We have 4 or 5 sections that we're going to go over today, and we'll break about 9:15-ish. Just do like a 15-minute break to give everyone just time to get some coffee, use the restroom, whatever you need to do. And then we'll kind of get back into things. We will be monitoring the chat. So if you do have questions, go ahead and feel free to type them in there. Someone will be monitoring that, and we'll answer those as we go along. Also, if you want to unmute and just ask a question, feel free to do that as well. I like having questions as we go along because we may be right in the middle of something and maybe somebody else has that same question. So if we answer it for the group, if we answer it for the group then maybe it will help somebody else who maybe just didn't ask the question. So please feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to answer those as we go. And then we'll also leave about 15-ish minutes at the end of the presentation for you to ask questions on the sections that we talk about, or if you have questions on QuickBooks in general, we'd be happy to answer those as well at the end of the presentation. And I don't know if any of you have been in one of our QuickBooks classes before. Before we kind of did a really high level overview of QuickBooks. So we talked about the different sections, different modules within QuickBooks. Today, we're actually we kind of chose 4 main sections that we've kind of heard might be ones that people want to know a little bit more about. So we're going to go into a little bit more depth in those sections today. So we won't go over all of QuickBooks, but we'll go into those sections in a little bit more detail. We will be using a sample company of QuickBooks. I'm a very visual person, so I like to use visual aids when we do have classes. So then that way I can actually show you where to go, where not just say, hey, click here and click here. We'll actually be using QuickBooks to walk through each of the transactions. So having said that, also the sample company doesn't always have everything that we can do. So that's why we've also provided the slides for you. So if we can't get to somewhere in QuickBooks, those screenshots are in those slides. And I always like to have something to provide for everyone to take away from the class. And then also on the slides, we may talk about everything in there, we may not, but at least you're able to take those with you and have that information for your future reference. So just a few housekeeping items. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see QuickBooks? Okay, great. Well, today, the first section we'll talk about is we're going to talk about the accounts receivable module. And the way QuickBooks works, QuickBooks does modules, is what they call them. And so the first module that we'll talk about today is the accounts receivable module. And what the accounts receivable module encompasses is your customers, your invoices, your sales receipts. It basically, any money that you have coming in can be recorded in this accounts receivable module. The biggest thing with the accounts receivable module is getting your customers set up. So I just wanted to briefly kind of go over the customer center with you. So on the customer center, this is where a lot of the information will feed when you do your invoicing or your sales receipts, is how you have it set up here in the customer center. And so if you need to add a new customer, you just come up here and you can add a new customer. And you can fill in, the only required information for a customer is going to be your customer name. You wouldn't have to fill out anything else on the customer screen. However, as much information as you fill out on here is going to be useful to you. So you want to fill out everything that pertains to what information you want to look back on the customer for. This information will pre-fill, like I said, into those forms. So it'll pre-fill into an invoice, it'll pre-fill into a sales receipt. And so you can just walk in and fill out your address. One thing I wanted to note, so say you have, let's just do SJHL. Say you have this customer and it's SJHL, but you want to remember it by SJHL, and you have a relationship with Debbie, and you want to remember it by Debbie. If you put the name up here, you can put whatever name you want up here. But down here, this is what will actually pre-fill onto the invoice or the sales receipt. So if you kind of know this company as something different, you can always add that into the company name, but it won't affect the invoice or the sales receipt that you are sending out to your clients or your customers. These tabs over here contain a lot of information, again, that you can fill out or you don't need to fill out. Payment settings. This is a place where if you have a credit card on file for your company, you can fill that information in here. And then whenever they pay an invoice, you can use that credit card that you have on file to pay that invoice. You can put their preferred method, their payment terms. Again, everything that you put on this customer setup will basically flow over to your invoice in your sales receipt. If you collect sales tax, you can create or set up the sales tax or the taxability of this customer. If your items that we'll talk about later are actually taxable, if your customer is set up as non-taxable, the customer setup will override the item setup. So if it's if your item is taxable, but your customer is non-taxable, when you create that invoice, it will override and it will be a non-taxable item. If you sell non-taxable and taxable items, you can set up tax codes and basically say for the different exemptions on a sales tax return, you can set those up to where each person then will fall under that, whatever exemption they might. So then that way, when you print reports, it's easier for you to tell where they fall on the exemption list and easier for you to file your sales tax return. On the additional info tab, you can kind of create types. So if you have people that are members, if you have people that are, you know, customers that they purchase stuff from you, you have, you know, you can create any type of customer type and group everybody, all your customers that way. So if you want to see reports based on a certain customer type, you can do that. It just allows you to kind of see where those customers are at, or maybe see what that group of customers is doing. What's also nice is you can create your own fields. So all of these fields right here were created, they're custom fields. If you click on define fields, you can just add whatever field you want. And now, of course, it's not going to work. Doesn't like me today. So if we need to, I wonder if we've hit, I didn't think we've hit our limit. Let me try something else here. I'm gonna have to look and see if there's a limit you can have. The fact that you have more options here. So if these were all custom created. So if you don't like what's named here, you can create a custom field, and then that custom field will show up on every customer. So once you create it once and you define that field, it'll be available for all of the other customers that you add it for. So it's a good way to track maybe information that is not standard that QuickBooks provides for you. It just allows you to track additional information on your customers. The way the accounts receivable module works in QuickBooks is it works on items, what QuickBooks calls items. Items are basically what you sell or what service you're providing to your customers. And you can basically have as many items as you want. And they can all go, say you only have one income account on your profit and loss report. You can create as many items as you want based on everything that you're selling, but everything can then pull into one income account on your profit and loss. So that's kind of what drives those invoices, and it drives those sales receipts within QuickBooks. So to create an item, if you go under lists and you go to item list, you can see the items that are already created here. But we'll go ahead and create a new one here. If you go down here to item and new, here's the item setup. You have, first you want to choose the type of item that you're selling, and the type will determine what options open up during the setup. So if you have a discount, for example, it'll show the amount or percentage of discount that you want to use. If you show a service item, maybe something that you're offering, it will open up these items. Inventory is not turned on. I'm not sure if anybody uses inventory or if inventory is even something you want to consider. If you turn inventory on, inventory items will be a type that you can choose once the option is turned on. And then it will open up again additional options when you're creating your item. We're going to go ahead and just create a service item. And we're going to say we are going to collect dues from our customers. So we're just going to create a membership dues item. And then again, whatever you, just like this, similar to the setup on the customer, what you fill in on this setup here will roll over to your invoice and your sales receipt. So if you have a description that you want to include on this item, say we want to say membership dues. 1 year. And you can put a standard rate. So if your annual dues are $150, you can put $150. It's taxable, non-taxable. You can choose that code here. This is the code where you would put those different exemptions. If you did need to file a sales tax return, but some are exempt, this is where those codes you could put in that match the sales tax return that you would file. And again, if we would mark this taxable, if the customer was non-taxable, this is what will override on the invoice and the sales receipt. Of course, dues are non-taxable, so we'll put it in as non-taxable. And then we have, this is the account I was talking about for your income that will pull over to your profit and loss report. So this file has quite a few income accounts, but we're going to go ahead and choose this membership dues. And then we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And now this item is ready to be used on our invoice or our sales receipt. You can get as detailed or as broad as you want with your items. Again, they all flow to one income account, so this allows you to get a little bit more creative on what you want to include on your items here. Another way, so we have 2 membership dues now here. Say we wanted to change this one. We're going to edit the item, and we want to change this because we put 1 year here. Let's change this to annual dues. We can make this a sub item of membership dues. So then it allows you to kind of group your items as well, making it a little bit easier to come in. You could do, say you have annual dues or you have monthly dues. You could look at each individual item separately, or you could look at membership dues as a whole. It just allows you to group things and analyze them a little bit better when they're kind of grouped together versus having to look at each item separately. So once you have your item set up, you're ready to start doing invoicing, you can come in here and you can create an invoice. QuickBooks has a standard invoice template that it uses, or you can create your own template. So if we go, here is Intuit's basic invoice that they provide within QuickBooks. You can customize your invoice and create as many templates as you want. So say you have membership dues, but then you provide workshops, and then you also maybe sell some products. You could create templates for each type of service or again, item that you sell. I wouldn't necessarily go by each item, but kind of each group of items, the membership dues, the maybe classes that you would offer or workshops. You could create the invoice and then have this invoice template pre-fill all of the information that makes sense for that group of services that you provide. So we're just going to kind of walk through customizing an invoice. So if you go up to formatting when you're actually on an invoice, and then we're going to go to manage templates. You can use select a template and then copy it and create, that way you've created a new template name. So let's call this one workshop. So now we have this workshop template that we're going to work with, and we're going to customize the way this looks. So we're going to double click on the template we want to work with, and it's going to open this customization screen here. This is basic customization you can do. I like to look at this as kind of how you make it pretty. You're adding your logo. You can add any custom logo onto your invoice. You can change the color scheme if you are big into color, making it maybe match your logo, have the colors match your logo. You can change the font and how the font looks on your invoice. You can also click what information you want to show on this invoice. So if you want all of this information, your fax number, phone number, email address, website, you can add all of that information by just clicking on it, and it will now show up on the invoice for you. You also have this additional customization option. With this additional customization option, you are able to basically do a lot more. You can choose, say you want to change the title of this invoice since it's the workshop. You can say workshop attendance or whatever you want to name the invoice. I'm going to say, let's not show this again. And so it changes the name, so it's not invoice anymore, it's workshop attendance. So you can change the name of any of these options here. You can also show whether they just show on the screen. So as you're entering the invoice, it will just show on the screen, or you can mark it to where it's printing, so it'll actually print on the invoice as well. So it gives you that flexibility with all of these options. If you go through columns, you'll be able to do the same thing with the columns. And then you'll also be able to do the same thing with the footer at the bottom of the invoice. You can change the names and what shows there. And then you can set up your print options for this invoice. This takes you a little bit deeper into the customization of your invoices. You also have one more layer, and it's called Layout Designer. With Layout Designer, you're able to move boxes around. So if you don't like the way that they look, you can just highlight them and you can move them where it makes sense to you. So this gives you even more flexibility. So again, you turn on and off all of those options on what shows here, and then you can move them around to what makes sense. And it looks then how you want it to look when you send it out to your customers. And then it'll take you back, you'll hit OK. And then now this template is saved. So say we want to use this workshop template, we just come over here when we're creating an invoice, we choose workshop template, and then all of those items that we've customized on the invoice will show up here on the screen, and then we'll print whichever options we've decided to choose to print for our customers. So I feel like QuickBooks Desktop especially gives you a lot of more options to customize your invoices. There are also templates that you can download. So if you want to really look a specific way, you can look at any downloaded templates that maybe somebody has already really customized. And if that matches more of what you're looking for, that's also an option as well. So now we're going to go ahead and create an invoice. We're going to kind of walk through creating invoices within QuickBooks. One thing I wanted to point out is in QuickBooks Desktop, there are several different ways to get to the same function. Some people use this home screen, which really kind of has a flow chart and flows through all of the different functions within QuickBooks. You also have these options up here. So if we're looking at doing an invoice, we can either come down on this screen and go to create invoices, and we get to the invoice screen, or we can go to customers and create invoices. The other option is QuickBooks has what's called quick keys. And I'll try and go through those quick keys whenever there's an option available. And if you're a keyboard person, this is a really quick, easy way to get into certain areas of QuickBooks. In QuickBooks, you can Google quick keys and get a whole list of them. There's a ton of them that you can use, or the main ones, and especially how to get into items, it'll say it right next to that item in QuickBooks. So for invoices, if you do Control-I, the invoice screen will pop up. Just making it a little bit quicker. If you like to use the keyboard as an option. So when you're creating an invoice, you can just start typing in any field. So I'll type in Eric Dunn. If you have classes, Rachel will kind of go over classes when we talk about reports, but classes just allows you to, again, customize your information so you can see it differently on reports. And if you have classes turned on, that will be an option. If you have multiple accounts receivable type accounts, this account will have a drop down where you can choose what accounts receivable you're wanting to use. So again, if you have different programs that or different areas that you offer and want to create a separate accounts receivable account for each, you can do that. And then you'd be able to do, say, get an accounts receivable aging report by just tuition, for example, because they have tuition set up, or just by pledges. So doing multiple ARs allow you to get a little bit more customized reports again down the road. You will just, if you have multiple ARs set up, you will just want to make sure you choose the right one when you're creating your invoices. And then again, we'll choose whatever template we'd like to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and use this dues invoice. And we're going to go ahead and pull in our membership dues that we created. So when we pull that in, it's pulling in the description that we entered. It's also pulling in the rate that we entered, which was 150, and it's also pulling in that it's non-taxable. If we created on Eric Dunn, if we go back to his setup, I have set him up as a non-taxable customer. So when I go to invoice, I put in a posters, which was taxable. You can see that it automatically changed him to non-taxable, even though the item was set up as taxable. So that's just to show you how that function works within QuickBooks. You want everything to, so like the address, that's what pulls over from your customer setup. And then if you would put in like a customer message on the template, that's what's going to pull it over here. Once you have all of the information filled in on your invoice, you can just go ahead and save and close or save and new. I'm going to go ahead and save and new because I want to show you another function. So your arrows get you back to the latest invoice that you did. One other piece I want to show you is under the reports section. If you click on reports, you have some additional functions here. I use this quite a bit. If this invoice was paid, if we would go to transaction history, it will tell us where the payment, it will show us the payment, so we can double click on where that invoice was actually paid. It will also show you a deposit. So wherever that payment is on a deposit, it will show you all of the steps that happen with this particular invoice that you've done. So it's a great, if you're wondering when this was paid and you can't really find it easily, this is a great place to go in and find that information. The other piece that I use quite a bit is the transaction journal. On the transaction journal screen, it's going to tell you what accounts this journal entry is going to be hitting. So if you see the invoice, you can't find it, and when you're reviewing your financials, you can come in here and you can see exactly what accounts it hit. So then you know what income account, for example, that it hit within QuickBooks. So another great tool. And one other thing I wanted to point out, to get in and out of screens, escape is a great feature. So if you have, say we have this transaction journal, we're done with the screen, if you hit escape, it will take you out of that window and take you back to the window that you have behind it. So easy way to get in and out of windows as well. One option that is becoming more and more popular is emailing invoices. So you can email them directly through QuickBooks versus having to print them and mail them. To set that function up, you go to Edit and Preferences. And then you have the option for Send Forms. You have two tabs here. You have My Preferences and you have Company Preferences. The My Preferences are going to only be for the user that is logged in. The company preferences are going to be across the board. So you have a lot of options here. If there's anything that you're wanting to turn on, features you want to turn on and off, it's more than likely going to be in this Edit and Preferences section of QuickBooks. Some users, depending on their security, won't have access to this. So you can monitor who can access and who can't access this section. Here you'll just create that you want a delivery email. Again, you can create templates. So you could create an invoice template. You just add a template. And what that allows you to do is change the body of the email. So if you have, again, certain invoices that you want to say certain things, say for membership dues or for workshops, you could change that template. And when you're sending them out, you just use that template when you're emailing invoices. If you have one that's already here, you can edit, allows you to edit what's there. One thing to note here is there's an insert field. So anything that's, say, on the company setup, if you put that in your email, it's going to pull from the customer setup. So you don't have to type in that information or it's just left blank. By inserting that field, it's going to pull from the customer center when it sees that information. So once you have the email invoices set up, when you create your invoice, you have the option to invoice each, email each invoice separately, or you can do it as a batch. So you could say email later, and then it will create, basically stack all of those invoices together, and you can send them out in one group versus sending them out each individually. So one thing I did not mention with the invoices are typically used when you are anticipating to receive payment at a later date. So then that way they're sitting out there, and then when you receive a payment at the later date, you can assign the payment to the invoice. You also have the option of a sales receipt. A sales receipt basically does the invoice and the payment function all at once. So this could be where, say somebody's sent you membership dues and you didn't create an invoice for them. You can create a sales receipt, which will then allow you to create, say, a statement later on down the road, so you can send it to them and it'll show the payments that you have received from that specific individual. So to do a sales receipt, it's going to be under the same kind of AR module or under the customers. And then you'll go to create enter sales receipt. It's going to look very similar to an invoice. Again, you have pretty much all of the same options. You can create sales receipt templates just like we did with the invoices. It's going to be the same process. You'll have the same levels of customization as well for your sales receipt. We're just going to come in here and we're going to use Mr. Dunn again. And if you have classes set up, you'll choose a class. The only difference that you have now is you're not going to choose an AR account. We're going to choose an account to deposit to. So since we're already receiving the money, we're basically going to put that money into the bank and record it on a deposit, which is why you have this deposit to option instead of accounts receivable. If you are depositing, this is the only thing you're taking to the bank. So we're only taking Eric's membership dues to the bank or his donation to the bank. Then you can choose the bank account directly. If you are taking multiple payments on one deposit, undeposited funds is the account that you want to use. It becomes like a holding area for the payments, and then it allows you to choose multiple payments on one deposit. So your deposit matches exactly what you took to the bank. So if we come in here and say he paid us his membership dues again for $150, we're going to go ahead and deposit to undeposited funds because we're going to have somebody else. We have multiple payments we're going to record. So we'll do Eric, and then let's say Paula paid us as well. We're going to go to undeposited funds. One thing to note here, actually, I'll talk about that when we talk about payments. So we'll go ahead and save and close this. So we have a couple payments going on. And so now that's creating sales receipts. So ultimately what that did is it did the invoice and it did the payment all in one transaction. So if we look at, we go in here to our customer center and we look at Eric Dunn, we can see the sales receipt that we created. And so normally you would have an invoice and a payment. Here you just have a sales receipt because it's both in one transaction. So now we've received the money from Eric and Paula, and now we're ready to take that money to the bank, or we've already taken that money to the bank. We're just ready to record that deposit within QuickBooks. One feature I would recommend turning on is if you go to Edit and Preferences. And you go to Payments. Under Company Preferences, there's an Automatically Apply Payments. I would turn this feature on. What this does is it allows you to, when you are receiving payment on an invoice, it allows you to, it'll automatically apply it to the invoice that it thinks it should apply it to. Because most of the time when you receive a payment from somebody, it's basically the exact same amount. So by having it auto apply, it just kind of saves a step and hopefully it applies it to the correct one. So to receive a payment for an invoice, you're going to come up here, go to customers and receive payments, or again, you can click on the home screen. We're going to receive a payment from Eric. We're going to say he paid his $150 dues. And by putting in 150, it automatically check marked the invoice that we created for him. So by turning that automatic apply on, it just makes it easier and it auto applies for you. If you don't like that feature, you can turn it off. I personally like it, so I just wanted to make sure I noted that. You want to make sure you include the date of the payment, so fill that in correctly. And again, we took this, we're going to take multiple deposits to the bank, so we're going to use undeposited funds here. When you're receiving a customer payment and you have multiple accounts receivable, again, you're going to want to choose the correct one. If we would choose this tuition receivable, we won't see any invoices here. That's because we have multiple AR accounts. We'll go ahead and save and close. Now we're actually going to record that deposit. So we can see here in the record deposit, we have 5 deposits sitting here waiting to be deposited into our bank account and into QuickBooks. So you can click on this record deposits, or if you go to banking and make deposits, if you have anything that's sitting in the undeposited funds, this additional box will pop up. So say we took $955 to the bank, and we know that's going to be these first 2 invoices. If we click on them, the total is $955. These other deposits maybe were taken on a separate deposit, so we can leave those out there. Go ahead and click OK. And now these deposits are sitting here. This amount matches exactly what we took to the bank, which is going to make it a lot easier on your reconciliation process. So that's where this undeposited funds comes in handy when you are taking multiple payments to the bank. Once this deposit screen's up, you just choose the correct bank account, the date you took it to the bank. And then say you have a random person that brought dues in and you want to go ahead and include it. It's included on here also. So you can add additional lines. You can include payments plus just additional things that you're taking to the bank that maybe aren't related to an invoice. You can add those there as well. One thing to note here is if you use a customer name on this screen that you didn't create an invoice or a sales receipt for, that information will not flow through to the customer center because it didn't happen within the AR module. So that's why the modules are important within QuickBooks. It just allows, if you use all of those features within that module, it allows you to collect the information there. So we could put Eric down here. I'm not going to include his invoices. And when I would save this, this would not show up on his customer center on the list of transactions. But by having this go through a sales receipt or an invoice, it will show up on his customer center under the transactions for him. One item that QuickBooks uses that or offers is QuickBooks Payments. It is an add-on feature of QuickBooks. It ultimately is like a credit card merchant account that you would have. What's nice about it is if you have that feature and you have it turned on and you're using it, when you email those invoices, there will be a link for the customer to pay that invoice directly from the invoice that they receive. So they could then enter their bank information or they could enter their credit card information on that screen, and it's a secure screen. And then that payment will flow to you. When you turn on customer payments or QuickBooks Payments, it will open up additional features. Again, this is a sample company, so I can't turn that on. But when you receive payments and somebody pays, say directly through an invoice, you will have an additional option up here that will allow you to choose, since the invoice was emailed and they clicked on that link within that email to pay that invoice, the payment will know when it comes into QuickBooks that it's assigned to that invoice. And so when you come into this screen, it will basically be able to apply those two together because it knows that's what invoice it's paying when it submits those payments through QuickBooks Payments. What's also nice is say you have a sales receipt, somebody comes in and they pay you, give you their credit card information, maybe over the phone. If you have QuickBooks Payments turned on, you can come in here, say they're paying their membership dues and they called in their credit card information. You would be able to then click on this credit card and enter. It's on the other screen and it's not liking it, but you'd be able to enter all of the credit card information and accept that credit card or use that credit card for payment on that sales receipt. You would also have the option, if you have QuickBooks Payments, to do an e-check. So if they provided bank information for you, you would be able to just click on the check, enter their banking information, and then that would record the payment against the sales receipt. You can do the same on an invoice when you're receiving a payment as well. In the packet that was sent out is the current fees that QuickBooks is charging for those QuickBooks payment features. And then I also provided a link that will show you additional information on QuickBooks payments. So you can dig into it deeper and see if it's something you want to turn on within QuickBooks. The final thing I wanted to kind of go over on the AR module is statements. So statements basically are, you can, again, you have a lot of customizable options with this. So you can customize a template, again, for maybe the different services that you provide. You also have options of what type of statements you want to create. You can email statements, you can do traditional print and mail statements. What's nice is you can also choose the date range that you want for those statements. So say you collect membership dues and you want to send out a statement at the end of the year for everything that everyone provided. You could create an annual statement and it will show all of those payments that you have received from that individual. Sales receipts will just show payments, where invoices will show the invoice and the payment received against it. You can do multiple customers, all customers, selected customers. You can do all of that through this create statements screen. When you can email again in batches. So it's not each individual statement. You can email in batches, which is nice as well on the statements. So those are the features that I wanted to go over within the accounts receivable module, basically the customer center. Does anybody have any questions related to this section? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see. Okay. If not, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rachel, and she's going to go ahead and talk about budgets and how to create budgets, enter budgets, reports related to budgets. So again, feel free to ask questions as she's talking. I'll be monitoring the chat. If you want to put any questions there, we'll stop and answer any of your questions. Yeah.
I just figured out how to unmute this and ask you questions. Sorry, I'm kind of slow at this. The part where the people could make a payment with their credit card or a check. I don't know, I'm kind of thinking this out loud. When you no longer accept checks from people or anything, can they go out and buy a money order and somehow put the money order through there or something? And I'm trying to brainstorm.
Yeah, I don't believe you would be able to do a money order, because if I logic it through and think through a check, you have to enter the routing number and the account number for a check. And I'm not sure on a money order if that information is available, because it has to have somewhere to pull it from electronically. So okay. In my mind, money orders would be then just considered a paper check versus something that could be automatically deposited through that check feature.
Okay, I guess they could always take it to their bank and have them put in a certified check information in there, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Rachel.
Okay, so we are going to go over creating a budget next. Okay, so if you go up to company and down to planning and budget and set up a budget. Okay, so you have the option to create a brand new budget, or you also have the option to pull up a prior year budget that's been created in the past. So for this example, I'm just going to create a new budget. So if I'm creating a new budget, you'll select this year that you're creating the budget for. So I'm just going to use 2026 for an example. And then you have the option to create a budget for profit and loss or balance sheet. If you want to create a budget for both, you'll have to create two separate budgets. You can't have the balance sheet information and the P&L all on one budget. So for this example, I'm going to create a profit and loss budget. You have three options to choose from if you want no additional criteria, if you want to have your budget by customer or job or by classes. For this example, I'm just going to do no additional criteria. And then finish. Okay, so since I selected no additional criteria, or I'm not importing my information from actual, which is from QuickBooks, you will have to manually add your information in your budget. So you'll have to click on each month and manually add your amounts in. So I'm just going to add a few amounts in to show you as an example. Okay, so if you enter every, have a dollar amount in every single month, then you have your annual total over here on the far left-hand side. And so you'll have to go through every account and add your amounts in. And so a couple of really cool features that QuickBooks has is if you want to change your amount, say that you decide you've got your budget created and you want your dollar amount to be $5,000 throughout the whole entire year. You can click on copy across here in the bottom left-hand corner, and it'll change your amount all the way across for your 12 months. Get to your annual total. Or you have the option to adjust your row amounts. So if you click on this, you can decide if you want to start it on the first month or if you want to start it on the currently selected month. So we'll just select the current selected month for starting in January. So you have the option to increase each remaining amount by a dollar amount or a percentage amount, or you can decrease it. So I'm going to just do an example of 3%. And you'll want to make sure that you put the percentage sign in, or it'll do $3. So I'm going to select 3%, and what it's going to do is it's going to change the amount for the whole entire year to increase it by 3%. Or you also have the option to decrease it or enable compounding. And enable compounding is you have the option to increase it by 3%, but it's also going to increase it by 3% upon 3% upon 3% for each month of the year. So if I select OK, here it's going to increase it by each month. Or you also have the option to decrease it. So we'll show you that as well. And now it'll decrease your amounts by 3% each month. Okay, so if you have your budget completely filled out and you decide the information's wrong, I need to start over, you have the option to clear your information, which will clear your budget completely to where you'll start over from scratch. Okay, so I'm going to show you if you have information already entered into QuickBooks that you can import your data in as well. If you go back to Company, Budget and Planning, create a budget. You can create a budget from previous year's actual data. So I'm going to check mark that. And since it's a sample company, there's not much data entered into QuickBooks already. So we just have a few rows that have some amounts in it. So you could go in and let's say you want to change your amounts, you know, instead of your annual total being 7,000, you want this 10,000. So you can just click on each box and adjust it if need be to get your annual total correct. Here. Okay. Then if you have a prior year budget, you can see all of your prior years. So in the past, I've entered a budget for the balance sheet for 2025. So here as well, if you have a previous year budget, you can go in and copy across, adjust your row amounts, and clear your data as well if you already have a budget created. Okay, then the next step would be is running your reports. So you have 3 different types of reports. You have, so you'll go to reports and then down to budget and forecast. And then you have your budget overview, your budget versus actual, and your profit and loss budget performance report. So your budget overview is your monthly revenue and expenses. Your budget versus actual is your compare your company's actual revenue and expenses to your company's budgeted amount. And then your profit and loss budget performance report is your actual revenue and expenses compared to your budgeted amount for the current month and year. So it'd be your year to date, which would be your January to your current month, and your annual, which is your January to December. And I'm going to run all 3 reports so you can see an example of them. So your budget overview, it'll ask you what budget you want to select. So I'll just click on a budget that's been created. Okay, so this is your budgeted amount, not your actual data that was entered into QuickBooks. So you can see here, you can sort your columns by month. So you have several different options. You can do your totals, your day, your week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, half a month, quarter, and year. What fits best for your company. So here I have it set to go by month. So you can also export it to Excel. So you'll just go to Excel here and create a new worksheet. And then you have a couple options here. You can create a new worksheet, a new workbook, or you can create it to an existing one. I typically always just create a new one and then move the data if needed. We'll see here if it's going to load. Okay, so then you can export your information to Excel and sort it. You can highlight certain rows or columns if needed. Okay, then your second report that you have is your budget versus actual. You can choose the budget that you would like to pull your information from. And this shows your amounts, your budgeted amount, if you are over or under on your budget, and then your percentage of your budget. You can also sort your columns as well if you'd like to see it in a different form. One really cool feature that you also have is you can customize your report. So here in your dollar over budget amount, you have the option in your customized report section under font and numbers. You have the option to highlight that information in bright red. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So it shows you that you are currently under budget by the 60,000. And so it's kind of just bold and it sticks out if that's something that you would like. You also have the option, if you would rather have whole numbers versus actual numbers, you can select without cents, and it'll show your whole numbers here. So it kind of all just depends on how you would like to see your reports best fit. So you also have the option, if you do not want to show, say that you only want to show your dollar amount, not your percentage of your budget. Under the display column, you can choose if you want to show your dollar difference or your percentage of your budget. So for this example, I'll just take the percentage of budget off to show you an example here. And so it's going to remove it for all the months. Okay, so you also have your advanced section. So in your advanced section, you can choose if you would like to show all your active accounts. So say in your budget, you're not currently using that account, it's still going to show up on your report. So you can choose if you want to see all of that, or if you want to see all accounts that only have numbers. Correct, you can just select this non-zero amount, as well as the show only rows and columns with your budget. So please select OK here. It'll remove the information that's not on your budget. So this is the most common report that most people use as well. So another really cool feature is, let's say on your accounts receivable, you just want to see your total amount. You can collapse your rows to just get the totals versus showing your main account and all of your sub accounts. So you can select collapse rows up here in your toolbar, and it's going to collapse everything to make your report smaller and just show your totals versus your sub accounts as well. So that's another really cool feature. If you decide that you want to expand your rows back, you can click on expand rows. Or you also have the option, if you want to just see your totals for accounts receivable, but you want to see the breakout of your other current assets. There's a little arrow here, you can select that. And it will also collapse your rows as well. Okay. Also under your customized reports, you have different filters. So you can select, if you would prefer not to see all of your accounts, you can select multiple accounts and choose the accounts that you would prefer to see on your report. Or you also have the option QuickBooks customize some general templates for you, and those are here if you just wanted to see all of your credit cards versus your assets and equity section. So you have the option to choose several different things. So I'll just leave that on all accounts. And then you have your header and your footer. So in the company name, you can change this to whatever. You also have your report title. So say you want to rename your report something different, you can change that in your report title. And we'll just put example after. And then select OK. And that's going to show up on your report as well. Unless you memorize your report here, every time that you would rerun your balance sheet budget versus actual report, it's not going to stay the same. So you also have the option to memorize that here, which I'll go into more detail on that on the report section. Okay, then you have your third report, which is your profit and loss budget performance report. So again, you'll always have to select the budget that you're wanting to print. Okay, so this shows the month, the budget, the January through December, and your year-to-date and your annual amount. So you just have a few more options with your budget versus performance report, which is very similar to your budget versus actual. So again, you can kind of customize the report that best fits you. You can customize it the way you would like. If you want your numbers, you know, to show in red, you can check mark that here. If you want to have it without cents, check mark that here. And again, you have the option to export it to Excel as well, or email it too. Okay, I think that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions?
How many people utilize this function already, or maybe it's something that you've been wanting to implement? I know this question comes up a lot. It's pretty quiet.
Any other questions for this section? And we also, if you want to use the chat, we also have that open. So feel free to utilize that if you don't feel comfortable unmuting.
I do. Barbara, I think, had a question in the chat, so I just thought I'd open it up to everyone. I've kind of talked to her, but she asked the question on sales receipts. If you have the option to choose an accounts receivable account when you are using sales receipts. So I'm sorry, this goes back to the AR module. Because you're doing the invoice and the payment in one function, you will not have the option to choose an AR account. AR is typically used when you have invoices that you expect to receive the payment at a later date, which then means you're monitoring that, you're monitoring what's outstanding on your invoices. So sales receipt, it's the invoice and payment all at once. So you're not expecting to receive that payment. Invoices, you're expecting to see that payment at a later date. So I just wanted to kind of open that again up to the group so everyone knew the answer to that question. Is there any other questions on the two options that two sections we talked about this morning so far? If not, we can go ahead and take a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll talk about reports first. And then we'll talk about payroll. And then we'll also talk about, I know today we're using QuickBooks Desktop as our reference. But we do have, at the end, we're going to talk about QuickBooks Desktop versus QuickBooks Online. So you can kind of see and understand the differences between the two and see if that maybe is an option you want to look at down the road. Or if you have yet to purchase QuickBooks, it will hopefully give you some insight on which one might be the best fit for your organization. So that will be the last topic we will talk about today. During the break here, Rachel and I will stay on the Zoom call. I might run out for just a second, but I'll come back. So if you have any specific questions or anything you want to talk about during the break, either of us will be happy to answer any of those for you. We did end a little bit early here, so let's go ahead and just come back about 9. We're going to end about 9:15, so let's just still come back about 9:30, and then we'll go ahead and talk about reports. Patrick, did you have anything before we went to break?
Nope, I think you covered it perfectly, Vicki. So yeah, like she said, we'll see you back here at 9:30, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have in the meantime.
Thank you.
Are you still there for?
I am still here, Sherry, although I don't know if, I think Rachel and Vicky might have stepped out for a moment. So if you have any QuickBooks questions, I unfortunately am not the expert on that, but I'm sure they'll be back here in about 5 to 10 minutes. If you have any Kansas Nonprofit Chamber questions, though, I'd be happy to answer those, Sherry.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'll be back in a little bit.
Patrick, are you still there?
I am, yeah.
Okay, it's Connie. I had a couple questions for you.
Sure. What's up?
Do you rent out your boardroom that sometimes? Sorry, I think I'm muting myself in there by mistake. Do you rent out your boardroom that you have at your address there?
Yeah, no, we definitely can have that rented out for members. Yeah, we do that.
Do you know how much?
I'm not as familiar with the rates. I'll have to connect you with our membership coordinator and also Cindy. They kind of handle all the building related benefits, because that is one of our benefits of membership. So I can connect them, or I can connect you with them afterwards and get you all set up.
Okay, and then also for board members, I think you have some type of a matching program. Can you tell me about that?
Sure, yeah. So it kind of goes both ways, both for boards and prospective board members. Boards, organizations who are members of ours do get this benefit for free. You can post any board positions you have on our board member matchup program, and we keep a record of that and try to pair individuals with boards we think they would serve well on. We also post those board listings on our website, as well as advertise them occasionally on social media. And the reverse of that is that, of course, people can apply through our organization as well to be on boards. And again, we try and pair organizations with individuals that we think would work well together. So when you fill out that board member matchup form as an organization, you kind of, explain what you're looking for in an individual. Some people want to have, as I'm sure you've talked with Cindy, you want to have a good diversity of individuals on your board. So maybe you're looking specifically for an accountant, or you're looking for a lawyer. So you can kind of indicate those things on your preference sheet. And again, on the flip side, if you're applying for a board, you kind of describe what sort of assets you would be bringing to an organization in that regard as well.
Okay, actually you're right. I have talked to Cindy and we've done the board matrix, and our weaknesses are the accountant part and an attorney part. So is that something that's typically can be found through you guys, or do you think I've been kind of looking outside already, talking to a few people, but it's more difficult than I thought to find those two components.
Definitely, and of course those are a specialized skill set. And again, since you are a member of ours, and it is a benefit of membership. So if you wanted to post your board listing, it can't hurt to get more eyes.
Okay, sounds like that's
on your list.
That sounds like my next step, right? Just post that, and I'll find that on the website where to post it.
Yeah. If you go to our website and you go to serve. Yeah, if you go under serve and you click join a board, there's a submit an open board position.
Okay.
And then that describes a form should be brought up, and yeah, you have organization, mission, open board positions, and then you can select what sort of expertise you're looking for. So in your case, finance, accounting. There's also a few other options: banking, trust, investments. yeah, and legal expertise as well.
Okay.
I'll also put that in the chat. Just
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah, not a problem. I will say we have kind of had a similar experience with other organizations right now. There's a lot of boards looking, but less people, I guess, are looking currently to join a board. So we echo the sentiment on that. It is kind of a difficult time right now. I don't know if that's COVID related. People are just, maybe a little bit overwhelmed with things opening back up and in their own work lives. So you're not alone in that, Connie.
Yes, I figured I wasn't. So.
Yeah.
And I figure that would be the hardest because it is a skill set. And, especially like an emerging nonprofit as we are, it's more of a working board versus a governing board. So that even requires a little bit more time. So.
Right, exactly. Exactly. That's tough. But yeah, I'd recommend just filling out that form and hopefully we can find someone to pair up.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Patrick.
I think we've started. So again, this second section, we're going to be talking about reports and kind of talking about the chart of accounts and how that relates into your reports, and then the different reports options and customizing. Then we'll move on to payroll, and we'll talk in detail on payroll. And then finally, we'll finish up on the QuickBooks Desktop versus QuickBooks Online. So Rachel will take this next section on reports. And again, if you have any questions, just send them through the chat or just chime in. We'd be happy to answer those as we go along. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rachel.
Can everyone see my screen okay? Okay. All right, so first off, I'm going to start with the chart of accounts. And so you have a couple different ways to get to your chart of accounts. You can either go to company and down to your chart of accounts, or you also have the option to use your quick keys, which is Control A to get you to your chart of accounts. So your chart of accounts is important because it is designed to separate by your different account types, which would be your assets, your liabilities, your net assets, which is also known as your equity, your revenue, and your expenses. So your chart of accounts is set up a way to flow to your financial statements. So the really nice thing about your chart of accounts is you can design it to best fit your financial statements and how you would like to see them on your financials. So I'm going to show you some really cool features with the chart of accounts that I really like, in the way you can move accounts. So I'm going to start with that. So you have across your top, you have the name of your accounts, your type of your accounts, your balances, which flow all the way down. So you can click on type here, and it's going to sort it by your assets, your liabilities, and so on down the line. So one really nice thing is, let's say that I would prefer to see my CD temp up closer to my petty cash. So there's a little diamond here on the far left-hand side. You can click on that, and you can drag up to where you would like that account to hit. Sorry, let's see here. Click up to see where you would like the account to flow on your financials. One thing you have to keep in mind, though, is you can only move accounts within that type. So I would only be able to move the CDs account within the bank account type. I wouldn't be able to move it down by accounts receivable. So you can easily just click and drag, and you can move it wherever you would like. You also have the option, let's say you created the account and you decided that you wanted to change the name of the account. You can either right click and go down to edit. And here you have several different options that you can do. Your account type is most often always going to stay the same. And then you have your account numbers over here towards the middle right of the screen. Your account number, there is like a standard sequence for it if you decide to use it. What I would recommend is working with your accountant to find out the sequence that you prefer to use. Then you have your account name here. You can change your account name to whatever you would like. So I might just change this to example. You also have the option to create sub-accounts. So over time, if you would want to create the CDs to be a sub-account of, let's say that the cash and bank payroll account, you can check mark the account that you would like it to be underneath, and the CDs will fall underneath the cash and payroll. And then you also have the option to put in a description. So in this example, they decided to set it up the way it flows to the 990. So they have the 990 line 46 is where this account is going to hit on their tax forms. You also have the option to put in your bank account and your routing number here if you would like to set up the bank feed, which the bank feed is your transactions. You can set up to link it and it'll sync over into QuickBooks, which is easier to enter your transactions if you choose to do that. Okay, and then you can hit save and close. And so now you can see that the CD's temp example is underneath your cash in bank account. So if you ever want to decide to make it a main account instead of a sub account, you can just, again, right click, edit your account, and just uncheck mark the sub account, which is really nice that you have that option. You also have the option if you decide to not use your, like, let's say we're not going to use this accrued revenue any longer. You can either right click and go down to edit account, and you have the option to make the account inactive. So let's say we make the account inactive last year, and then this year we're like, hey, we actually need to use that account. You can go down to include inactive accounts. And if you check mark that, it's going to show you all the accounts that have ever been inactive on your chart of accounts. So let's say I decide I wanted to make that active again, or any of these accounts. You can just click on the little X and it'll make the account active to where you can use it. If you decide to create a new account, not knowing that the accrued revenues account was previously made, QuickBooks will prompt you and let you know that there's an account already out there. And so that would be your sign to look in your inactive accounts to see if there's been an account named that in the past. I typically will uncheck mark this so that my chart of accounts is a little bit cleaner. But if you prefer to see it, you are welcome to leave that on as well. So another feature that QuickBooks has in your chart of accounts is if you would like to add a new account. So down here, you'll just click the little arrow beside accounts and go up to new. And then you have the option to choose the category of the type of account that you're creating. If you don't see it here, there's this other account types down here where the rest of your accounts are. So we'll just create a cost of goods sold account. And we'll just continue. And then it'll prompt us to put in an account number if we choose to do that, in our account name. So we'll just select cost of goods sold job, and then I'll make it a sub account. Yes. And then if you want to put any description, notes, or if you want any tax line mapping, that information is here. And then save and close. Okay, and then I can see that the account is going to show up here. And again, you can't, if you decide that you want to move the sub account, you won't be able to move it because it's a sub account, not a main account. So you would have to go in and uncheck mark make a sub account, which is here. Okay, so you also have the option in your chart of accounts to enter transactions. So if we go to our bank account here, you can double click on it and you can enter transactions through your chart of accounts as well. You also have the option to attach. So if there's anything that you want to attach, like an image or anything, you can also attach that here as well. Okay, so then let's see. Your reports. So you have a couple of different reports that I'm going to show today. Your balance sheet, which is also known as your statement of financial position, or you have your profit and loss, which is known as your statement of activities and changes in your net assets. So first, I'm going to go over your balance sheet report. So if you go to reports and down to company and financial, and I always typically run just the balance sheet standard report. And then you'll want to make sure that your date range is correct. So I'm just going to do as of 12/15 of 2025. You'll want to make sure that your basis is correct. So we'll just select cash basis. And then you have the option to customize it if you would like to show the previous period, the previous year. And if you select your previous year, you have the option to do the dollar change or the percentage change. So I'll just do dollar change.
Rachel,
Okay. You also have the option. Yeah.
you have something blocking the top of your screen. There's like a gray area blocking it. Do you have anything in front of that?
Is that better?
No, it's still there.
Because the only thing I have that I've been trying to move around is like the share my screen and then the chat.
Can you minimize those?
Is it still there now?
Yeah.
That's like a gray box that moves around.
Mm-hmm. I think it's probably better. It's at the bottom now, so that may be better.
That'd be better.
Yeah, than at the top, because I think you're using a lot of the.
Yeah, it's my sharing my. Okay, it's the sharing of my screen where I can stop or start my video.
Okay.
In
Yeah,
the
I would
chat.
just leave it. I would just leave it at the bottom.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
you're good.
Okay, so you can also customize your report. So if you go back to customize report and go to your font and numbers, you have the option to, if you want to change in your bright red, your without sense, you have your options here. You have your header and your footer, which for this example, I'm going to change my report title to my statement of financial position.
One thing to note, if you are looking at this, Rachel, sorry, I'm going to interject here just a minute. If you have the QuickBooks Desktop has industry specific softwares. So if you have, say, the nonprofit industry specific software, some of these reports are probably already named that. But in a normal version, say Pro or Premier, you're going to have where it says balance sheet, and then you can change the name like Rachel is doing here. So just note, depending on what version of QuickBooks you're on, it might look just a little bit different.
Okay, so if I select OK, then that is going to change the name of this report. But in order for it to stay like this, we'll have to memorize the report, because if you would exit out and then get back in at a later date, it's going to just go back to your balance sheet. So if you click on memorize reports, you have the option to memorize the report. So we'll just call it a statement of financial position. And another really cool option that QuickBooks has is you can memorize your report within a group. So I'm going to save it within a group. And I'll show you where you can go and edit your group. So if I know I'm going to run this report maybe once a month or every week, then I can create a group where I know those reports are what I need to run, every month. So I just named one Rachel's reports, or we'll just go with like nonprofit. And then we can select OK. Okay, so it's going to capture and memorize the report. So the easiest and fastest way to get there is if you go to reports and down to memorize reports. And if you click on memorize report list, it's going to show all the reports that QuickBooks has memorized for you already. So if you would like to create a new group, Sorry, I'm trying to move this little. Okay, so down here you have your memorized report, and you can create a new group. And so we'll call it example group. We select OK. So every report that we memorize moving forward, we can save into this group. And it's always going to show up. And you are also can grab it, and if you can move it up to the top as well. So it's at the top of your report list, of your memorized report list. Okay. So on your statement of financial position, you also have the option to export your reports to Excel. So you can create a new workbook or update an existing workbook. So I'll just create a new one. I kind of touched on this a little bit on the budgeting section. But you can, again, modify the report that best fits you. And if you decide to add to your existing workbook, then it'll just create more sheets down here at the bottom for you. You also have the option to collapse your rows, or you can do it, you can click on your little arrow to condense your sub accounts just to your total amount, or you have the option, if you want to do all of them, to collapse all your rows here to make your report smaller or expand them. Okay, then your next report is your profit and loss, also known as your statement activities and changes in net assets. So I will go to my profit and loss standard. And I'm going to customize my range. Change my basis. And on your profit and loss, I always like to compare it to last year. So I will do the previous year and the change amount. Here. Okay, so one really cool thing about your profit and loss is you can set up classes. So classes are really good if you want to track certain income and expenses by different brands, locations, or any other important detail of your business. So I'm going to show you how to set up a class, how to add a class, and a report that you can run for your classes. So first, you'll want to make sure that your class is set up in your preferences. So if you go to Edit in Preferences, you'll want to make sure that you're on Accounting, which is at your top, and over to your company preferences. And you'll want to make sure that this Use Class Tracking for Transactions is turned on. I always like to make sure to prompt to assign your class. So if you would enter a transaction into QuickBooks, it's going to prompt you to enter a class if you don't have one entered when you try to save the transaction. And so it's also just a good double check. If you forget to enter it, it's going to pop up with a warning sign letting you know, like, hey, your transaction doesn't have a class assigned to it. So this is where you turn on the class, and so we'll hit OK. And then under List, you can go down to your class list. And here it'll show all the classes that QuickBooks has already created. So if you would like to create a class, you can select Class down here in New. And then we'll create a class called Sample. And your class is kind of list is kind of very similar to your chart of accounts, because you also have the option to click on your diamond and move. You also have the option to right click and edit your class and make it a sub account. So we'll just make a sub account of research. If you choose to make the account inactive, you can do that here, or you can also right click and make it inactive. Okay, so I'm going to enter a transaction to show you how a class is used. So if you go to banking and write check, you'll want to make sure that you're on your correct bank account. If you have a check number, you would enter that here, or if you just have like an ACH withdrawal. And then your date, and we'll write the check to car telephone. The amount $50. The account will do telephone and telecommunication. Okay, if you want to enter a memo or anything like that. So here we have the option to add a class. So let's say that we forget to add a class and we select save and close. You're going to get this box here that shows you have one or more items that are not assigned to a class. Do you want to stop and enter it, or do you want to save it anyways and move on? So I'm going to hit cancel so that I can go in and make sure that I have a class associated with my transactions. And then I'm going to hit save and new. And I'm going to create one more. For $50 supplies, and I'm not going to put a class in this time. And hit save and close. Okay, so then you can run a profit and loss by class. So we'll go to reports, company and financial, and then down to a profit and loss by class. And it's going to show all the classes that we have in QuickBooks with a transaction amount in it. It's going to show up, it's going to list your class here at the top. I'm going to scroll all the way over to the far right hand side. This would be like a really good report that I would like to export to Excel, just since it's so large. I can condense my rows and easier to read in Excel. So at the very end, you have this column called unclassified. So this column here shows you all the transactions that you have entered into QuickBooks that do not have a class associated with it. So I'll scroll down and I can see that I have one in a supplies for $50 that does not have a class. And so you can double click on that transaction. And I will click on it here. And I'm going to go ahead and assign a class because my end result is to have nothing in that unclassified column. And so if all transactions are associated with a class, then you will not have an unclassified column here. Okay, so you can also customize your report here to your filter. You can either, if you want to do a previous year, year to date, you have your filters. If you want to show just certain classes. So let's say we click on, let me back up, sorry. Your filters, you'll want to go down to class. And then right now, this report is filtering all classes. And if you select multiple classes, then you can go in and choose the class that you would prefer to use. So I'm just going to click on a few of these. And the only ones that I have check marked are the only ones that are going to show up on my report. So then you can break it down if you want to compare, the 521 to the 531. It's a little bit easier to see versus having all of your classes out here as well. If you decide you want to change that, then you just go back to your filters and you'll want to make sure you're back on your class. And you can select all classes and your report is going to go back. Or you also have the option to revert it down here. And then your header and your footer, again, I'm just going to change the name of this. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and memorize this report, because if I memorize the report with only showing, 5 different classes, you can go into your customized report and change that as well. So I'm going to memorize it, and I'm going to save it in a group so that it's at the top. And it captured it. And so then I can get out of it completely. And if I go back to my reports, memorized reports, it's also going to show your memorized reports here as well, or you can click on the memorized report list. And then here's my statement of activities in the asset. So it's going to memorize, the 5 that I had selected, but I can also customize it and add new ones. I can rememorize it, or I can just continue to go in and edit it. If you want to change your display column here, you can also, if you don't want to see by class, if you just want to see by totals, you can customize that here versus going in and running a completely new report. You also have the advanced option if you would prefer to see the non-zeros, or if you'd prefer to see only the active accounts or all accounts. And so then it just changes my report and shows my total amount versus my classes. Okay, does anyone have any questions?
You know what? I don't have a question, but I will say a couple things on this section. We see a lot of different financial statements and help a lot of different organizations. And I will say this area with the trial balance and setting up your accounts is one of the most important parts. Just because, how you set these up is how the data is going to come back at you and enable you to run your organization. So we always recommend that you spend a lot of time setting these up correctly and in a way that will be the most useful to you. If you need help, I would reach out to your accountant, or you can shoot us an email if you have questions on how to set up an account, in the right section, because it really is important where it does show up on your balance sheet and on your statement of activities. So I just can't stress that part of it being as important as it is.
Yeah, and I'll kind of play off that a little bit, Debbie. I'll kind of play off that a little bit, Debbie. It's, you want your chart of accounts to be as detailed to where you get the information that you need, but you also don't want to make it so detailed that it's overwhelming and it's not meaningful and beneficial to you. So there are ways to structure your chart of accounts to be able to, if your board wants to see something a certain way, you're able to structure it that way. Also, Rachel hit on this a little bit. You can structure your reports so they flow to the 990 a little bit easier. So how you set this up can really help you down the road. And so kind of taking where you want to end and then kind of backing into how you set up your chart of accounts is to me the best way to approach that. And your accountant, in my mind, is going to be the person that's really going to have that knowledge and know what needs to happen. And we're always available, like Debbie said, for questions. If you're wondering how things need to be structured or how you can structure it in a way. And one thing, what's great about sub accounts, so say you flow it, your chart of accounts more towards the 990, but you want to see more detailed, that's where those sub accounts really come into play, because you could have maybe your main account be what is going to flow over to the 990, but then you have your sub accounts that fall in that category, but they're the detail that you want to see. So there's just lots of ways to structure it to make basically the process a lot easier all along the way. So it's kind of the key. It's the heart of your QuickBooks file, in my mind.
Agreed. I think you'll definitely get a payoff from the time that you invest into this this project, and it'll be well worth it.
Does anybody have questions over reports or chart of accounts or anything that Rachel or I can answer?
Can fresh reports be made, such as brand new reports? I know we've gone over how you can modify reports, but if you want to start from scratch, a whole new report, is that available in this, or is that something that you have to take in the outside, like Crystal Reporting, and hit the database with it?
Yeah, there's really the only, Rachel, will you click on reports? You have the option. You have a custom reports option down here at the towards the bottom, and you can customize to an extent. You can't really cross modules. So say you want a report that has an AR aging and an AP aging, you know, you have those reports together. You typically can't cross modules, even when you're creating custom reports. So you're kind of starting with what QuickBooks gives you and then customizing it within that area. So in respects of just starting from scratch and building one, that's not really an option. Customizing is really going to be the best way, hopefully, to get you what you need.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to go on to everyone's probably favorite subject, which is payroll. Rachel, would you mind not sharing your screen, and then I'll go ahead and share mine. Okay, can everyone see my screen? See QuickBooks again? Okay. So payroll is, we get a lot of questions on payroll, so I wanted to go maybe in a little bit more depth than we have on any of our other classes related to payroll. Payroll is an add-on feature for QuickBooks. So again, it's one of those additional options that you can purchase. It doesn't initially come with it. There is usually either a monthly fee or an annual fee, depending on how you set it up. And then there's also a per employee fee. In your handouts, I kind of gave you all of the pricing associated and the different options for payroll. I would say the most common, and in my mind, the one that you have the most control over, is going to be your enhanced payroll option. You are essentially responsible for processing the payroll tax deposits, payroll reports. You're responsible for all of those features within the enhanced payroll. You can add on additional, or you can use some of the additional features with QuickBooks, where QuickBooks will help you with some of that. They may make your payroll tax deposits for you or file your reports, or they could do everything for you. So you have those options available. I like the enhanced just because, again, it gives you a little bit more control, more ability to make corrections, more ability to set it up the way it works for you. So that's the one that I typically recommend to our clients. The big key thing with payroll, kind of like the chart of accounts, even more so with payroll, is getting everything set up correctly from the start. Because if you get it set up, maybe the taxability is not correct, maybe the item was set up incorrectly, that just compounds and builds with the reporting that you do, with the tax deposits that you make. So making sure you get things set up correctly is ideal. Again, there are resources out there to help you with the setup. Your accountant, if you have a payroll provider, that person is also available to help you answer any questions that you might have. In your handout, I kind of over earnings and deductions, which is kind of the start of the payroll setup. I kind of gave you some common ones that you would typically see. A couple I want to highlight on the earnings items are the stipend. So stipend can be used for, I've seen it in several different ways. It could be used as a wage, wages that you're paying to an individual. It could also be used as a reimbursement. for somebody. Typically, if it's wages, it's going to be taxable by all taxes, meaning that the employee is going to have to pay their portion of the taxes and then the employer as well. If the stipend is just a reimbursement or an allowance, depending on how you have that structure will be how it's handled tax-wise. And that usually falls within what they call an accountable and a non-accountable plan. So if you have an accountable plan, that means that, say it's an allowance for a cell phone. If you have an accountable plan, they will provide you, whoever you're giving, say, $50 a month to, they would need to provide you some sort of documentation to substantiate that expense or that allowance. And if they provide that to you, then that does not become taxable to that employee. If it's a non-accountable plan, you are basically just giving them $50 and they don't have to substantiate that. So in that scenario, you would then, that item would become taxable to that employee. So just, again, if you have questions on that, or if you're wanting to make sure that's set up correctly, please reach out to your accountant or your payroll provider, because there could be reasons that it could be different. So you want to make sure you have those set up correctly going forward. Then on the common deductions items, typically you have what's called pre-tax items, and you also have after-tax items. Pre-tax items are usually, what that means is you have your gross wages, you subtract whatever deduction it is. So say it's a pre-tax. You have your gross wages, you subtract whatever deduction that is from your gross wages, and then taxes are calculated on basically that net, those net wages. You have items that are pre-tax by all taxes, so pre-tax by federal, state, Social Security, and Medicare. You also have items that are only pre-tax by certain taxes. Some of those are your 401k or your simple plans. A 401k is only pre-tax by federal and state wages, and your simple is the same way. It's pre-tax by only federal and state wages. To set up your items, if you go under lists and payroll item list, this is where anything that you're going to be using on the payroll side will be set up. So you have your wages and you have your deductions, and you also have your taxes listed on the screen. So to create a new item, you just go under payroll item and new. An additional box will pop up and it will ask you the setup method. The easy setup will guide you a little bit more, and it will kind of default to some standard settings. The custom setup allows you to do a little bit more customization on those items that you set up. I prefer the custom setup, but you, like I said, you have either option. So say we're going to go through the custom setup. You choose what type of an item it is. So we're going to go ahead and create both an earnings item and a deduction item. So our first item is going to be a wage, something that we're going to pay to an individual. So we're going to hit next. I'm going to set it up. You have the option whether it's a salary item, hourly wage, commission, or bonus. I'm going to go ahead and set this up as an hourly wage. And there's no additional, it's not going to be overtime. There's no additional that's going to be paid. It's not going to be sick or vacation. I'm going to go ahead and set up holiday. So I'm going to go ahead and say it's regular pay. Go ahead and next. You can create a name however you want it to be named. So if you have pretty specific items that you're paying out, again, you can create that name, whatever makes sense for you. You need to choose the expense account that this is going to be tracked to. So you have the option of just payroll expenses, and it can lump all of your wages together. If you want to see your wages broken out, say you want to see your salaried people separate from your hourly people, your overtime separated from your holiday, we can create separate accounts. So I'm going to go ahead and create an account here. And I am going to make it a sub account of the payroll expenses. We'll do salaries. And it's gonna make me put a name or a number. So now when I look at my chart of accounts or I look at my profit and loss report, I'm gonna be able to see exactly how much we've paid out for holiday wages by breaking it out into its own separate account. And then you go ahead and hit finish. Because we set it up as an hourly rate, QuickBooks knows that that option, or actually because we set it up as a compensation item, QuickBooks is going to know that that is a taxable wage item, and it will calculate taxes based on what we set up. So then we can also create deduction items, same way. Go to the custom setup. Say we're going to create a deduction. We're going to name this one, let's go ahead and set up a 401k deduction. Here, you can set up any items to where you can track them as a liability and pay them out through the liability section of the payroll module. So we're going to say this is going to be paid to John Doe Investment. And we're going to go ahead and create them as a vendor. And then if you have a specific account number that that agency identifies you as, you can put that account number here in the account number section. On the liabilities, so this is what's going to flow to your balance sheet in your liability section. And this is going to show if you owe, any tax, that's what's going to show on that screen based on the payroll due process. I would recommend setting up a separate liability account for each deduction that you create. Well, you don't necessarily have to do for insurance, but you can kind of group them. But for all your taxes, I would definitely set up separate liability accounts. And then for your 401k, I would separate it out as well. The reason being is it's going to be easier to track if something is off. So say, let's go ahead and set up our 401k here. And I'm going to make it a sub account of the payroll liabilities, and I'm going to call it 401k. I'm not good at picking numbers today. There we go. So once we get done with this, I'll show you the chart of accounts and show you how that's a sub account. So if anything that now is processed with payroll that's 401k related will go to that account, and you'll be able to then look at it if that account isn't zeroing out, say it's not getting paid or things aren't getting recorded correctly. It's just easier to tell that I'm having it separated out versus all in one account and not knowing which liability may be off. So you just hit next. So we want to figure out how the tax tracking on this. So QuickBooks has a lot of the common options here for deductions. So since we're creating a 401k, when we click the 401k, it's going to know how it's going to be taxed. So it knows the 401k is pre-taxed by only federal and state wages, which is what it's indicating down here. So this is a useful tool if you're not sure how a deduction needs to be handled. When you click on it, QuickBooks will default. If it doesn't seem right to you, again, ask your accountant or payroll provider and make sure that is correct and how QuickBooks wants to handle it. On here, it's telling you that it's any item that's checked, it's going to be pre-taxed by. So it's pre-taxed by Kansas withholding and pre-taxed by federal withholding. We'll click next, and you can set default. So 401k does have limits, so you could set the limit for that. So say the 18.5, 16.5, somewhere around in there. You can set that limit here, and once they've hit that much in the deduction amount, it will stop and it will no longer calculate the 401k deduction. And then you can just hit finish. And now our deduction item is set up. And again, everything is grouped by the type that you set it up in. And you are able to come in here and change and edit any of these items. So we could come in here and edit this item. if we say we want to change the name or change the account, you can come in here and change any of the information we just went through on the setup. One big common, I guess, question that comes up is how to handle employees, whether they are handled through as actual employees or whether they're handled as contractors. And so the big difference between the two is an employee, taxes are taken out of their wages and their information is reported on the annual form W-2 at the end of the year. For a contractor, you pay them the gross amount with no taxes taken out. Their information is reported at the end of the year on a 1099 form. And then at that point, the individual is responsible for paying the taxes related to those wages on their tax return. Some kind of the three questions I ask to start with to help decide whether or not somebody's a contractor or an employee. Those questions are in your handout. So I put, does the employer provide all equipment for the individual to do their job? Meaning, do they provide a computer? Do they provide office space? Do they provide a desk? What do they provide for them to do their job? Does the employer tell the individual when and where to be at work? So are there set hours that that individual needs to be working for you? That's another question to ask. And then does the individual provide the same services for others? So if I answer these questions, so say I answer the first one, yes, that the employer does provide the equipment, and then the employer does tell them when and where to be to work. And then does the individual provide services to others? I would say no. On that question, that person would then be classified as an employee. So I also provided a link which talks about in more detail employee versus contractor. It again is important to make sure you have them set up correctly in your system and you're handling them correctly. So I would recommend, following that link, asking the question and making sure you do set them up correct going forward. So next, we say we've determined that they're an employee and we want to go ahead and get them set up in the system. So we can go to employees and go to employee center. And here, again, you can just come up here and click new employee. This can be used almost as an HR function as well, and meaning it's just an HR function to be able to collect data on your employees. So you can fill in as much of this as you want. The required information that you need to fill out is the legal name, the social security number, address information, and then also we'll come into the taxes tab so you know how to calculate taxes for that individual. So you'll just come in here and fill in as much information. You will want to make sure you use one of the forms that you collect for an individual. One of the forms that you collect from the individual as you're completing this information. It could be the W-4, it could be the I-9, because you want to make sure you have the legal information for that individual. You could have somebody who goes by Sam, but for whatever reason, his real name is Daniel. You want to make sure you're entering his legal name. So not Sam, you're going to want to make sure you enter Daniel and when you're creating that employee. And then you want to enter their social security number. And then again, like I said, this is the rest of this information is going to be information for your benefit. You don't necessarily have to fill it out. Address you do want filled out because you want that to print on their W-2. So let's go ahead and enter that. And then the additional information tab again is going to be information that you can fill in. You can create custom fields just like you could on the invoice that we were talking about, or the customer setup that we were talking about. You can create those here as well, and turn on and off what you see here. The payroll info. This is a big screen that you want to make sure you do fill information out on. We'll talk a little bit later about setting up a payroll schedule. When you set up a scheduled payroll, you can include an employee in that scheduled group. So when you start that scheduled payroll, all of the individuals or employees that are listed in that scheduled payroll group will show up and be ready for you to enter a paycheck on. Again, you can also set up classes. So Rachel talked about classes. You can break out the individual or the employee for their wages and their expenses to go to a certain class. If you set it up here on the employee setup, it will do the entire paycheck. You can also set it up to where, say, certain hours are for certain classes, and you can do that on the actual paycheck entry screen when you do enter that later on. So we'll go ahead and just do that this person is research. This earnings and this additions and deductions sections, anything you fill in here will pre-fill when you create a check for an employee. So if we come in here and we say this person has an hourly wage and they get paid $20 an hour, that will pre-fill now. And so say they also get overtime, we can go ahead and fill that in. Say they get holiday that we set up, any earnings item that they may use, it's a good idea to put it on their employee setup so then it will pre-fill down the road. Same with deductions. So say they have health insurance, you can put however much their deduction is for health insurance. And then if there's a limit for the year. So this is a great place to say somebody has an employee advance. You can put in, there's not an advance created, but you can put in the advance line and say you're taking out $50 per paycheck and it's a limit of $500. So by putting the limit of $500, it'll stop the deduction once it's reached $500. If you have direct deposit set up for your employees, you can click the direct deposit tab and enter that for your employee. If you have sick and vacation as an option, as a benefit for your individuals, you can keep track of their balances on the sick and vacation tab. If you accrue so much per paycheck, you can add that information in here as well. So say you accrue, 1 hour per paycheck, you could add 1 hour per paycheck. And then that's what it'll accrue each time. And then it will show the balance on the pay stub for the individual. This taxes tab is going to be you want to enter something on this tab. This is going to be, your federal is going to be based off of the W-4 that the individual completes. You have the option if they fill out the form, the 2019 prior or 2020 later, it changes the options based on that form. So they did change the structure of it a little bit, and however they complete that form is how you want to enter this information. That's what determines how much federal tax is going to be taken from your employees. State, you'll choose what state that they work in. And then if there is unemployment, that's what the SUI tab is. And then subject to withholding, this is the state that's going to be withholding. And in Kansas, there's a K-4 form you want your employees to fill out, and that information is listed right here, how they complete that K-4, which will determine your state taxes that will be taken from that individual. So that's the required information that's needed for the employee setup. So you have the option to do a scheduled or a non-scheduled payroll when you're entering. So if you come over here to employees and payroll center, you can create your payroll schedules. So you can create a new schedule. Say you have some of your staff that gets paid bi-weekly and some that gets paid monthly. You can create a monthly batch or a bi-weekly batch. Whatever period dates you put in here is going to be the next date that's processed. And by completing this, you will see the schedule of your payrolls here and the ones that you need to process next. So because we set up a scheduled payroll, we can start the scheduled payroll, and it's going to pre-fill all of those pay period dates. So we don't have to remember what our pay period dates are. We can go in and it's automatically going to adjust that each time once we've processed payroll. And when I talked about, setting up a payroll schedule on the employee setup, when you set them up, you now see all of the employees on that schedule. They will be check marked here, ready for you to enter payroll. To enter payroll, once you get to the screen, I always like to do this open paycheck detail. It basically brings up what the check is going to look like. So you can see that this person on their employee setup had a salary item. So it's bringing over what their salary item is. And then it's also breaking out what their taxes are based on how we completed the taxes tab. If this individual uses direct deposit, you would check mark this and it will direct deposit the check based on the information you completed. If there was a class for this individual, it would be the class again for the entire paycheck. You can add a column here that will be, it would be in the setup section where you can then do each line item would be a different class. If you wanted to, there would be an additional column here. The vacation and sick that we talked about will show up here. So you can also see, say the employee is using vacation, but maybe they don't have enough. You can then either talk to that individual or not pay them out their vacation because they don't have enough on their balance. So that's another something you can use here to view as you're entering their check. You can add anything on the fly. So say this person, we wanted to give them a bonus this payroll. You could just add a bonus. This will not save to their employee setup. It will be for this paycheck only. So again, if you had an advance, I know we don't have an advance item, so we'll just use this health insurance again. You could put in here that we needed to take $100 advance from them, and you could do that on the fly. It won't be saved on the employee setup. Then you have your check amount, your net check amount. So you just want to check this and make sure everything is good. If you have more employees to enter, you'll just hit save and next and keep going through until everyone's entered, and then you can hit save and close. Once you have gone through and save and close, we're ready to create the paycheck. So we're going to continue. And then now we're ready to create the paychecks. Here you have the option that, hey, we're going to print paychecks on check stock. We're going to handwrite the checks, or if you have direct deposit turned on, there will be a direct deposit option here. You will just choose what bank account it needs to come from, how you're going to process that, and then you'll hit create paychecks. And now the paychecks will be created. If you're wanting to print them, a box will pop up and you can print the paychecks. If they're direct deposit, you can print the pay stubs and you can provide those to your employees. Payroll taxes. So we're just going to kind of walk through these tabs here. So now we've paid the employees, we've processed a payroll. Now we're ready to pay our taxes. So on the pay liabilities tab, you can either set up certain taxes as e-pay, where you can pay those directly through QuickBooks, or you can set them up to where you just enter the check within QuickBooks, but then you go out to the agency website and you actually make the payment there. Down here is where you do all of that. You can manage payment methods or change the payment method. Again, this is a sample company, so a lot of these features for payroll are not active, but I did show you in the handouts what each of those screens will look like. If you do e-pay, there is, so like I know for certain your Kansas unemployment, you do not have to have any additional documentation or send in an application to get that set up as e-pay. You can do that directly through QuickBooks. You just need to make sure you have your routing number and account number listed on the bank account that you're going to use. If you're going to do any e-pay through the federal taxes, which are the 941 taxes or 940 taxes, you do have to sign up for their e-file option to be able to do that pay those payments with actually in the QuickBooks file. So when you do set up items to say you've processed a payroll and you're ready to pay your taxes, any of the taxes that are due based on your setup. So if we go back to our lists and our payroll item list, here are all of the taxes that we've set up. Let's just go into Kansas withholding. So when we came in here and we set up Kansas withholding, we said it was payable to the Department of Revenue, and we're going to put in our account number and our liability account. It's pre-taxed by those items, which we know. So this agency is going to be key in making sure that liability flows throughout the entire payroll process. So once we've set up our tax, then we can go down here. So we're going to go into, when you go into the manage payment methods also, you're going to choose the frequency in which that payroll tax is set up. So the frequency is determined by the agency. So say on Kansas withholding, they have a look back period on what they determine your frequency is for to remit your Kansas withholding taxes. So it could be anywhere from annually to quarterly to monthly. Then there's also some that are right after the payroll. So depending on what your liability has been historically will determine what your frequency is that you have to pay those taxes going forward. Once you process as a payroll, depending on how you've set up that frequency and depending on how you've gone through all the tax setup, those taxes will be listed here ready for you to pay. You can then just highlight the tax you're wanting to pay, click view and pay. If you have it set up just to be a check, it'll just bring up the right check window. So it'll be very similar to this screen. And you will then, it will bring in the information as far as the payroll item that you're paying within those payroll tax liabilities, and it'll bring in the amount. You just have to fill in, say you're going to the agency website, it's an automatic payment, and the date the payment comes out, you would just have to fill in that information. If it was ePay, it'll still take you to the same screen. There'll be a section that'll ask you what day you want it to be withdrawn on. And then once you enter that information, you'll hit save and close. It will process the payment through QuickBooks. And then it will give you pop up a box for you to put your email address in, and it'll send you a confirmation when that payment has been received. And then when it's also been processed, you'll get confirmation of both of those. I do want to show you the chart of accounts where we kind of created those payroll liabilities. And you can see that they're all each a separate line item. So what makes that nice is then, so say we have a balance here of $205, but we feel we've paid it, we can then double click in and we're all going to see only the transactions that are related to Kansas withholding, not all of the payroll taxes. So we don't have to sift through everything. We can look just at Kansas and determine, okay, is that balance correct or not? So payroll reports, there are several reports that you can run for payroll. The one that I run 90% of the time, probably 98% of the time, is this payroll summary report. And again, we can't process payroll, so there's no information here that we can pull up. But I did put a sample in the packet. What I use this for is, say I'm going to pay my payroll liabilities, and it says I owe federal taxes of $1,000. I'll look at the payroll summary and just add up my 941 taxes and make sure those two tie out. Everything's within QuickBooks, so it should. But that is, if it's off from what you think it should be, that's a great way to double check and make sure everything's set up correctly. If they don't match, most of the time something is not correct on your setup. And so it's just a good way to catch that by looking at your payroll summary. So like, for example, your 941 taxes are your federal, your Social Security and Medicare, both the employee and employer taxes. So if you would add all of those together and you have your 941 tax liability listed here, those should match. And then that will just be your double check. You know, as accountants, we like to make sure everything ties out. So that's just your double check to make sure it processed correctly and was set up correctly. Any payments you do make, say by ePay or even by check, they will all be listed down here within this payment history screen also. I meant to mention that. What I also use the payroll summary report for is when I'm filing the quarterly reports or I'm filing annual reports, I use that payroll summary report to make sure those tie out as well. It just provides really all of the information that you need. You can customize that report too by a certain class. If you want to see how the detail by each class is, it would be kind of the same customizable options that you have on other reports. So yeah, say we want to do by class, we can do our filter by class, and we can only see, we could say, hey, we only want to see research. So it's another good way to see payroll information by specific items that maybe you set up within QuickBooks to really see how your payroll are doing. On your payroll summary report in your handout, you see the adjusted gross pay. If there were any deduction items set up for this individual that we used as an example that were pre-tax, you would have another section that would be deductions from gross pay. And those deductions from gross pay would be any of those pre-tax deductions that you would have that you set up within QuickBooks. So say health insurance or 401k or simple, they would all be listed in that deductions from gross pay section on your QuickBooks. The other nice benefit of the payroll summary report, if you click, say, on the federal withholding tax, it would bring up tell you the wages, the taxable wages that were used to calculate that that federal withholding within the system. So it's really a good report, and like I said, that's the primary report that I use for payroll within QuickBooks. One of the benefits of using payroll within QuickBooks and processing your payroll is most of the quarterly reports and annual reports are already built into the system. There are, I would say the ones that I don't see are if you have local taxes. A lot of those local reports aren't built into QuickBooks, but most of actually all your federal and then most of your state ones are there as well. So say you're ready to process your quarterly reports. If you just come in here to payroll, let's go actually to your payroll center, and we'll follow the same sequence and click on file forms. Here are a lot of the forms. Here are a lot of the forms that you will file either quarterly or annually. In your handout, I've listed a lot of the common reports that you do file quarterly and annually, and it kind of gives you a brief detail on what needs to happen with those reports. Similar to the payroll tax liability payments, you can also manage the filing methods for your reports. So you can set up any of these reports to be e-filed directly through QuickBooks, or any of them can be printed and then sent, mailed in to any of the agencies. I will tell you, again, the state unemployment report does not require you to get any additional information to e-file it. Once you set it up as e-file, it'll just e-file through the system. Again, any of the federal reports that go to the IRS, you do have to walk through the process of getting those e-filed. When you click on the manage filing methods, it will list, give you instructions on how you can set that up with that agency to be e-filed through the system. Also, the W-2s, which go to the Social Security Administration and not the IRS, those can be set up to be e-filed without any additional documentation needed to set that e-file up within QuickBooks. Whatever report you're running, you just want to come in here and create form. You'll choose what quarter you're running it for. and then the report will pop up. You'll have kind of an instruction sheet to make sure you fill out and answer the questions they have listed here. You kind of click next and go through and you actually kind of see the report. And this is where you want to verify this information with the payroll summary report and make sure it just is flowing over correctly. You also have a check errors box down here. The check errors will tell you if you have any errors within that report as far as missing information or something maybe isn't check marked correctly. It's going to be listed in this check errors. It's not going to be the detail it's checking errors on. It's just the overall content of the report that you're going to see there. Once you have no errors, then again, here is your options. You'll have either print for your records, or if you have e-file set up, you'll have the e-file form. Once you've processed this form, again, you're going to have a history section that's going to tell you if you file them or if you e-file them. It's going to tell you when it e-files. If you process it through here, it's going to send that same, pop up that same box for you to put your email address in, and then send that to a confirmation when it's been received by the agency, and then also when your payment has been processed if you have a payment. So that's kind of payroll in more detail than I think we've gone into. Does anybody have any questions related to payroll? Rachel, is there anything in the chat?
There's not.
Okay. Well, then I'll go on here real quick to QuickBooks, the desktop versus online, and kind of tell you the differences between the two. And then we can wrap up within the new questions, like I said, overall about anything that we talked about, or if there is, you know, any specific questions that we can help with that maybe we didn't talk about, we can also help with as well. So QuickBooks has two products. They have the desktop, which is what we focused on today. So I'll kind of talk through a little bit of the desktop options. You have the option of Pro, Premier, or QuickBooks Enterprise. QuickBooks Enterprise is the beefiest version that there is. It has a lot of the advanced inventory, advanced reporting. It's very beefy, and so we don't have a lot of clients that use the enterprise version. The common one is Pro, and then next we see more Premier, but I would say a majority of our clients are on the Pro version. Premier would be used a lot if you want the industry specific software. So like I talked about, there is a nonprofit industry specific software. You can get that with the Premier version. And then a lot of what it does is it changes a lot of the form names. It changes it so it feels more like a nonprofit organization versus more than a for-profit company, which is what the normal QuickBooks would look like. Again, you can change the name of the reports and stuff like Rachel showed you, so you can get by with using Pro and then just changing those names if you want to see them differently. A couple of big things that with the QuickBooks product is you actually get a software that you download onto your computer. So it's, and you can create as many users to access the QuickBooks file as long as it's on one computer. Where it gets a little confusing is when it says a one user license. What a license is how many times that QuickBooks file is going to be downloaded on a computer. So if you have 3 computers that it needs to be downloaded on, you need a 3 user license. If you have one computer that you want QuickBooks on, but you want multiple people set up as users, you can do that and set them up as individual users, but it all has to happen on one computer. So really when it says user license, it's how many computers is it going to be installed on. QuickBooks now offers 2 ways to purchase QuickBooks Desktop. You can purchase the software outright, or you can purchase an annual subscription. And if you're not on QuickBooks or you're getting ready to purchase it, this gets a little bit, we've had a few clients that have gotten on the annual subscription and did not want to be on that. So you might just be careful when you are purchasing the new one that if you don't want to be on that option, you don't choose it. But what the difference is, the outright software, you pay a little bit more, but you can keep that version really for as long as you want, unless you use 3 features. If you use payroll, QuickBooks payments, or you use the bank sync function, you have to upgrade your QuickBooks file, desktop file every 3 years. If you don't use any of those features, you can use it longer. We recommend to our clients that they still do the every 3-year update, just to make sure we're able to keep access to their file and it doesn't cause any issues to be an older version. With the annual subscription, you do pay a lesser fee, but you do pay every year. So you pay an annual amount and then you get the new version every year. So you would be upgrading your file every year. And QuickBooks, they call their versions by the years. So right now we're in version 2021. So if you're on the annual subscription, when renewal time comes around, you'll renew and then you'll upgrade to 2022. So there's not an option to upgrade, you have to upgrade. And say you got on the annual subscription by mistake, unfortunately, you have to then purchase the product outright the next year, and then your 3 years would start. So just something to be cautious of, because I know it has caught a couple of our clients, and they did have to then purchase it outright because they didn't need to upgrade every year. Talking a little bit about QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks Online it functions just the same as QuickBooks Desktop. However, they did not actually take the desktop version and move it to online, so they do look different. But the same features are there. So the same features that we walked through today, they are on the online version as well. They're just in a different location. And the way the QuickBooks Online works is you have different versions that you can use. And a lot of the determining factor on the versions are the number of users that you need to access the file and whether you use classes. Those are 2 big things that I ask when determining what version a client would best fit for QuickBooks Online. Most of our clients use the Essentials version of QuickBooks Online, and that seems to accommodate a majority of our clients across the board. If you do use classes, the Plus version is the lowest version that you can use for classes. The pricing that I have listed here, I just actually got notification yesterday or the day before, that QuickBooks is actually increasing their pricing. So the pricing I've already included on here is going to be out of date here shortly. So if QuickBooks Online is something you're interested in, I would just look up and see what those current prices are. There are plenty of places that you can get discounts for, even QuickBooks Desktop you can get discounts for, but there are plenty of places that you can get discounts. We have a company that we partner with. You don't have to be a client of ours, but we have a company that we partner with that we're able to pass a discount on, both for desktop and for online. The online discount is 50% off for the first year. So that's an option for you. Also, TechSoup is another great place to go to get discounts for nonprofit organizations. I know sometimes QuickBooks Online can be, I think I've seen some as low as like $50 for the year or something. So it's a really great discount to go through TechSoup. You do have to make sure you qualify, but that's definitely where I would recommend going. Even for your desktop version, I do know they offer discounts for that as well. You can do your online version either as a monthly fee or as an annual fee. You do get a little bit of a price break if you do annual versus the monthly subscription. But you just continue on that subscription until maybe you decide you don't want to use it any longer. Then you can just stop the subscription and then you don't get charged for it. Kind of on the final page here, I put some pros and cons of QuickBooks Desktop versus online. I've been here, like I said, for 14 years. So when I first started, online was not, I didn't even want to use online. It was kind of not a good word. And if we had to get in it, it was a little bit of a struggle. It's come a long way. The online has, and I would say right now, we used to be like 90, our firm was like 90-95% QuickBooks Desktop. And I would say we're almost switched to 85-95% online. In my mind, there's just a lot of benefits for it. One, you anytime, anywhere access to the file. So especially now with COVID times, a lot of people working from home, it's not, you don't have to worry about them having QuickBooks Desktop on their computer to work at home. They can work wherever they have an internet connection and they can log in. So that's a benefit. If you have an accountant like we do, we're able to get into the file the same as the client can. So that helps we're be able to do what we need to do and the client at the same time, which also is that internet access. One of the pros, I would say, you could say it's a pro and a con with online, is that you're always on the latest version. So meaning that any updates that happen, you may go in one day and it looks this way. They do an update, you go in the next day and maybe that function is a little bit different. The plus sign in QuickBooks is a great example of that. We put a booklet together for a class that we did. The plus sign was up in the right hand corner. After we did the book, like a month later, the plus sign moved over to the left hand side. So it does change as you go. Some of the features you are grandfathered in and you can turn them on. So there was a bigger change to the sales tax module in QuickBooks. You had the option to stay on the old one, or you could move to the new one. So it was nice that they gave you that option. The pros and cons of QuickBooks, I can get around. I use the keyboard a lot, so I can get around in desktop. And I think there's a lot more features. I feel like in QuickBooks Desktop that like customizing reports, there's more options to customize reports. There's more options to customize security roles for users. So there's a lot of benefits to QuickBooks Desktop in that aspect. The downside is kind of what we talked about, has to be installed on a specific computer. And if you use any of those three features, you're required to upgrade. Another con is sometimes there can be corruption in your desktop file, depending on how long you've been there, how many transactions. When that does happen, you basically have to create a new desktop file and basically start over, enter beginning balances, and then start using that new file. So just another thing to consider on desktop. I know I high leveled that. We're running a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I want to leave plenty of time here at the end. If anybody has any overall questions for either Rachel or I or Debbie, we're happy to answer anything on any of the topics, like I said, or any topics or questions on QuickBooks in general. Both Rachel and I use it day in and day out. We don't know everything, but we do have resources to find out the answers. So even if we don't know, we can write down your information and make sure we get back to you and get that information to you.
And while everyone's thinking of questions, I do just want to chime in briefly and mention that the recording that we're creating today will be sent out in the follow-up email tomorrow. So you can expect that to be made available for about 2 weeks. So if you have any content that you'd like to review, do so then. Additionally, I am going to put up a poll on the screen now. We do like to collect evaluation data on all of our programs. So if you just want to take a minute, again, while you're thinking of your final questions to fill that out, we definitely really appreciate it. But like Vicki said, the floor is open to any questions anyone has. Sherry just asked in the chat, can we contact you afterwards if we have a question?
Absolutely. We put our contact information in the back of each section. So please feel free to email either of us or give us a call, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I would also mention in the feedback, if you'd like to see some of these QuickBooks sessions really concentrated in a certain area or combined with specific accounting issues that we could, connect the dots or help you manage your books a little better, be sure to write that in the comments, because we'd be glad to put something together to address that as well. So we just, we put together some generic information, but we would be glad to go a little bit deeper and help out organizations a little better, if that will help.
Yeah, we hope the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber, has us back. We really enjoy doing this. So if there are, I agree with Debbie, if there are any specific, maybe we cater an entire class to a specific topic. You think you have more time and you get into it and there's a lot of details. So we want to make sure it benefits our audience and who signs up for it. So we're happy to talk on any topic as that you list.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely appreciate that feedback. And of course, we also always love partnering with SJHL to put together these wonderful QuickBooks workshops. Well, if there are no, lingering questions, again, we had the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber. As well as, as Vicki mentioned, those at SJHL are available. If you have anything lingering that you think of later, we can certainly answer those if you just want to reach out via email. Again, on that follow-up, I'll be sure to include Vicki, Debbie, and Rachel's contact information if you want to reach out to them, or of course you can contact us at the Kansas Nonprofit Chamber, programming at ksnonprofitchamber.org. And again, that follow-up will be sent out tomorrow, expected around tomorrow morning probably. So, well, thank you all so much for attending today. We definitely really appreciate it. And if we could just get, if everyone could go down to that reactions bar on Zoom, give Debbie, Rachel, and Vicki some claps just for the wonderful content they provided. Again, we really appreciate having them on here and sharing their expertise. And Vicki, Debbie, or Rachel, do you have any parting words of wisdom?
One thing I'll mention real quick is Vicki and Rachel spent some time in these handouts that were emailed to the participants. This is great information as a resource material. So I appreciate that they did that. I hope that you can get some really good use out of that as well.
All right. And with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Stay cool, and we hope to see you at some of our future events.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.